Now guys, just before we start this video, I just wanted to quickly remind you to join our AFL Fantasy and AFL tipping comps. The codes are on screen right now. All you have to do with the tipping comp is download the ESPN Footy Tips app and join up to the league. And if you win either the AFL Fantasy League or the AFL tipping comp, you will win a $100 gift voucher to the AFL store. So make sure to click the links down below, join up, and let's have some fun. But for now, let's get into today's video. G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. Now today, I thought with just a few weeks to go before the AFL season finally begins, we'll be doing our final ladder predictor before the season begins for 2025. So as we did do this a couple of months ago, we'll be using the same website, the Squiggle website, where you can predict every single game of the 2025 AFL season. So let's not waste any more of your time, let's get into today's video. So of course, we do start with opening round, the Brisbane Lions up against Geelong. Tough game. I'm actually going to go with a bit of a surprise pick here. I think with Brisbane coming off the grand final, a couple of injuries, I'm going to go with the Cats in a close one. Sydney v Hawthorn. This is an interesting game, I think, for both teams. I'll go with my Swans in the first game. Gold Coast v Essendon in the Gold Coast. I think the Gold Coast have to get off to a good start to the season, so we'll go with them. And then final game of opening round, I'm going to go with the Pies. But then we get to round one, so every single team is into it. And actually, let me know down below, guys, how you feel about opening round, if you like it or if you don't. I'm kind of 50-50 on it at this stage. Carlton will beat Richmond. I think Richmond are in for a pretty tough year. So I think Hawthorn are in for a very good year, so I'm going to go with them here. Down in Geelong against Fremantle. I think Geelong with the extra game will win that one. Sydney v Brisbane, grand final rematch. Is it the SCG? But Brisbane don't have too many bad games there. I'll go with Brisbane. Bulldogs should win that one pretty comfortably. Collingwood v Port Adelaide. This is a really interesting game, but I think with Collingwood with the game in hand, having that little bit of an extra match fitness, I'll go with them. Crows, that's in Adelaide. Crows will win that. MCG, Melbourne v GWS. I'll go with Melbourne. I think at the MCG, I think I give them a bit more of a chance. In Perth, Gold Coast have to win some games away this year, but in Perth, I'm going to go with West Coast. Carlton v Hawthorn at the MCG. I'm going to go with Hawthorn, 15 points, I'll say. I think they're going to have a pretty good start to the year. Bulldogs v Collingwood. I think this is the anniversary game for the Bulldogs this year as well. Being at the MCG, though, I will go with the Pies. Essendon v Adelaide. MCG. Crows don't really have a very good record away from home. I'll go with Essendon. Adelaide over Port Adelaide. This will be a pretty comfortable win. Geelong v St Kilda at Docklands. I don't know how the Saints are going to go this year. With a couple of injuries, I think they may struggle at the start of the year. So I'll go with Geelong. Brisbane win that one comfortably. Docklands for Melbourne. Seems like Clayton Oliver and Petrarca seem to be in good spirits, but I don't really know how they're going to go this year, to be honest. Fremantle, high hopes for them. I think they'll beat the Swans there. Essendon v Port Adelaide at Docklands. I'll go Port Adelaide. They have a pretty good record there. Carlton v Bulldogs. I'll go with the Blues. Melbourne v Gold Coast. If this is at Marvel, I'd give Gold Coast a good chance here. But at the MCG, I'll give it to Melbourne. St Kilda v Richmond. Yeah, I'll give that one to the Saints. Hawthorn v GWS. That's in Tassie. Yeah, I'll give that to Hawthorn. Crows win that one comfortably. First derby of the year. I'll get that to Freo. Interesting game. The last couple of these games, the old traditional rivals, these are very close games in recent memory. I really don't know how Carlton are going to go. I'm going to give it to them. Geelong will win that one comfortably. In the Gold Coast, Adelaide. I think they're going to have a good year, Adelaide, to be honest. I have to give them a couple of wins away from home because I think they're in for a good year, to be honest. Even though it's the MCG, Brisbane win that one comfortably. And I'll give it to Sydney. North Melbourne are a bit of a 50-50 as well, I think. Giants up against the West Coast Eagles. Yeah, for Sydney, that's fine. Port Adelaide win that one. St Kilda, I think, have a pretty decent, not a great record of winning, but they do keep it close against Port Adelaide. I will give it to Port, though. Perth for Fremantle. Yeah, they win that. Crows up against Geelong and Adelaide. This is the first game of Gather Round 2. Crows have won one game for a gather round and lost one. This is tough. I'll go Geelong in a close one. Collingwood up against Sydney at Adelaide Oval. Collingwood have been pretty good for gather rounds so far, and they've been pretty decent away from home. I will give it to Collingwood. Gold Coast against North Melbourne in the Barossa. I'm going to go with a bit of a surprise pick here. I'm going to go North. Carlton up against West Coast. I'll give it to Carlton. Brisbane have been pretty good in gather round. I'll give it to them. Oh, this is a tough one. I'll give it a slight edge to Melbourne. I'll give that one to Freo, even though it's in the Barossa. GWS have played some decent games in Gather Round, so I will give it to them. Port Adelaide v Hawthorn. This is going to be a great game. I love how the AFL are just broadcasting it as like the big fight with Ken Inkley and Hawthorn last year, even though they fined him 20 grand. They should make him refund that, by the way. That's fucking ridiculous. I'm going to go with... I'll go with Port Adelaide Oval. Brisbane up against Collingwood. I'll go the Lions because it's up there. I feel like North Melbourne have to win a good Friday game soon. I'm not going to give them this one though. West Coast up against Essendon. I'll go West Coast because Essendon don't have a great record in WA. Melbourne up against Fremantle. Oh, that's tough. It is at the MCG. But Fremantle have been pretty good against Melbourne recent times, I believe. So I'll give it to them. Crows will win that. Oh, in Docklands, I'll give it to the Gold Coast. Sydney up against Port Adelaide. Prelim final rematch. I'll give it to Sydney. Bulldogs up against St Kilda. I'll give it the Bulldogs. And then the Easter Monday game. This is going to be interesting, this one. I think Hawthorn are finally back. I'll give it to the Cats. All right, so now that we're at the end of round 6, guys, we'll take a look at the ladder for the first time. And it does seem I've got Geelong undefeated up the top. Brisbane, of course, the reigning premiers, are in second. Fremantle in a good spot there with Collingwood in the top 4. Melbourne's a bit of a surprise having them in the top 8, to be honest. A couple of teams outside the top 8. Very interesting. I've got a couple here. Hawthorn, Sydney, Gold Coast, Giants, and the Bulldogs. I would have expected them to be inside the top 8 at this point, so it's a bit surprising that I've got them outside. And St Kilda right down the bottom here. I think with a couple of injuries, I've got them a bit lower than I would have expected. But yeah, an interesting start after 6 rounds of the season. But before we go any further, a message from me. If you guys enjoy the content and you want to see more, then make sure to become a member on the channel today. For just $4 a month, you can get early access to video essays, access to live recording to the Boundary Riders podcast, along with exclusive stream perks and much more. And something that I'm super excited to introduce to channel membership this year is the members vote. Every week with the review, you can cast your vote to have your say on the Boundary Riders medal. So for all that and more, click the link down below, and for the added bonus of getting an extra inch onto your member, then do it now. But anyway, let's get back into the content. So the first game of round 7, Melbourne up against Richmond. I'll give that one to Melbourne. And then Anzac Day. Interesting one because Essendon haven't been too bad the last couple of Anzac Days, but I think it will be close. The last one was a draw, so I will have to pick a couple of upsets as well because, I mean, obviously no one's going to win every single game. Yeah, I'll give it to Collingwood. Fremantle up against Adelaide. Yeah, I'll give that to Freo. Docklands, will go to Brisbane. Port Adelaide have a very good record against North. I'll give him that one. GWS against Bulldogs. That's an interesting game. GWS, I'll give it to. Gold Coast against the Swans up in the Gold Coast. Gold Coast had a good record against Sydney for a while, but it's kind of dropped off in recent times. I will give it to Sydney. MCG, Carlton v Geelong. I'll give it to Geelong in a close one. Hawthorn against West Coast. At Docklands, I'll give it a Hawthorn. Essendon v North Melbourne at Docklands. North Melbourne nearly beat them last year, and I think North Melbourne are in for a bit of a decent year. You know what? I'll pick an upset here. I'll pick North Melbourne on the fact that they had a pretty good record had a pretty good game against them last year. I'll give them a go, and I think the forward line of North Melbourne may get some decent games. I'll give it to them there. St Kilda up against Fremantle. It is at Docklands. I don't mind St Kilda in this game, but I'll go Fremantle. That's in Mars, this game, so I'll give it to the Bulldogs. Adelaide versus Carlton, Adelaide Oval. Yeah, Adelaide win that. Collingwood v Geelong at the MCG. I'll go Collingwood, actually. I'll give them that one. West Coast against Melbourne in Perth. I'll give that one to West Coast. They won it last year too. I feel like the Giants have to win a Sydney derby. They've lost the last 3 now, so I'm going to go with the Giants there. Hawthorn up against Richmond. Yeah, Hawthorn win that one comfortably. Q Clash. Yeah, Brisbane win that one well. Collingwood have done pretty well over there, but we'll go Fremantle. St Kilda against Carlton at the MCG. It is Spud's game though. Oh, I'll go St Kilda. They'll play for him. Melbourne against Hawthorn at the MCG. That one's Hawthorn's. Essendon against Sydney and Docklands. I'll go the Swans. Gold Coast up against Bulldogs. I like the Gold Coast at home. First showdown. Give that one to Port Adelaide. And then, this is an interesting one. Richmond against West Coast at the MCG. You know, I'll give Richmond their first win of the season here. GWS against Geelong down in Cardinia Park. Giants have done really well down there the last few years. I'm going to give it to the Giants, to be honest. North Melbourne against Brisbane down in Tassie. North Melbourne aren't too bad down there. I can't warrant giving North Melbourne a win, like an upset, but I wouldn't be surprised if they claim that. Gold Coast up against Hawthorn in the Gold Coast. I'll give it to Hawthorn though. Sydney up against Carlton. This is Indigenous round, I believe. Yeah, I'll give it to Sydney. Collingwood against the Crows. They usually have close games. I'll give it to Collingwood in a tight one. Port Adelaide v Geelong. Give this one a close one. I'll go Port Adelaide. GWS against Fremantle. Fremantle choked this game last year. I'll go the Giants. Bulldogs up against Essendon at Docklands. Yeah, I think they win that one pretty comfortably. Richmond against North Melbourne at the MCG. I'm going to go North here. I think that North Melbourne will win that one at the Gabba. That's an easy one. Perth Stadium. St Kilda did cause an upset against West Coast last year there, but I don't think they're going to do it again. Geelong down in Cardinia Park. Yeah, I'll go to Cats. Essendon up against Richmond. Yeah, that's Essendon. Carlton up against the Giants. Yeah, I'll go the Blues. I can't see that. I feel like they'll win that one. Hawthorn up against Brisbane. Hawthorn have a good record against the Lions at the MCG. North Melbourne nearly knocked off Collingwood last year at Etihad. I'll go Collingwood. Perth Stadium, Fremantle against Port Adelaide. That is in Perth. They did choke that one last year though, but I mean that was when their finals were going to shit. So I'll go Freo. Adelaide win that, don't they? You'd think so. Sydney up against Melbourne at the MCG. Sydney don't have a good record there to be honest, but I'll go Melbourne in a close one because it's at the MCG. St Kilda up against the Gold Coast at Marvel. I'll go the Gold Coast here. Couple of points. Yeah, they win that one pretty comfortably, I'd say. Brisbane against the Bombers. Hawthorn up against Collingwood at the MCG as well. This will be a big game. They've had some good rivalries in the past. I like Hawthorn this year. I'll go with them. Huge trip for Fremantle. I'll actually give this one to the Gold Coast. Sydney, they'll flog them. Sydney up against Adelaide. Sydney have a good record against the Crows in recent times. Crows probably have about time to beat them there. Melbourne in Darwin. Yeah, they'll win that. Perth Stadium, West Coast v Geelong. Geelong don't have a bad record, I don't think, there, to be honest. But that's the end of round 12, guys. So 106 games have been tipped. Let's take a look at the ladder predictor after 12 rounds of the AFL season. So with that being said, it's been a bit of a change up on the ladder. Brisbane are sitting in top spot, reigning premiers 10-2. Hawthorn are sitting in second with 9-3. Fremantle 9-3 as well. The Cats 9-3 with Collingwood, so a big logjam between 1 and 5. Port Adelaide, Giants, and Sydney have jumped into the 8. So I think 2 of these were outside the 8 in the 6 rounds ago. You can see here that Melbourne are just falling outside the 8 along with the Crows. You got Carlton sitting in an 11th, Gold Coast in 12th, Bulldogs right down here in 13th. Now, because of the buys, a couple of teams, there's some differentials of games played and whatever. But West Coast sit in 14th spot, North Melbourne in 15th. And wow, I have St Kilda and Essendon right down the bottom. That's really harsh. I know a lot of fans won't like that. Richmond still tied to the bottom after 12 rounds. So moving into round 13, Bulldogs up against Hawthorn. Yeah, it's the Docklands though. I'll go Hawthorn. Adelaide Oval against Brisbane. I'll give Crows a sneaky one here. MCG, Richmond beat the Swans last year. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. They'll win that one comfortably. The Cats. Manuka Oval. I like the Giants here. I'll pick them. This one's in Perth. This is that weird ground. I can't remember off the top of my head, but North Melbourne actually don't have a bad record in Perth at recent times. I'll actually go with them here. Carlton up against Essendon. MCG. I've given Essendon a lot of flack in this video, and I'm going to continue to. Sorry. Melbourne up against Collingwood. Melbourne haven't really been good in these Queen's birthday games. The big freeze. I'll go Collingwood. Round 14 at Docklands. I'm going to give this one to St Kilda. They have to start winning eventually. Down in Tassie, Hawthorn win that. At the Gabba, Brisbane win that. The MCG. Geelong have tended to dominate these games against the Bombers. I'm going to go with them again. Fremantle, they did upset them last year, North Melbourne, but that's not going to happen this year. Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide v Melbourne. Melbourne, I think, won this game last year, but I don't see that happening again. Carlton up against West Coast. I'll go with the Blues. I think they've got that one covered. Fremantle up against Essendon. They win that. That's a big game. Down in Geelong. Geelong versus Brisbane. 2 heavyweights this season, I think. I'll go with the Cats just because it's down in Geelong. Yeah, Carlton win that. Adelaide Oval, I don't trust Sydney against Port Adelaide, Adelaide Oval. Last time it scarred me, 112-point loss. Collingwood against St Kilda at Docklands. This may annoy people, but I'm actually going to go St Kilda here because at Docklands, I think Collingwood could slip up in one of those games. The Expansion Cup, that goes to the Giants. Bulldogs win that one. Collingwood win this one. Crows against Richmond. It is at the MCG, but surely the Crows don't lose that. Gold Coast up against Melbourne in Gold Coast. That really didn't hamper Melbourne last time. They did get an upset win there. I'll go with the Gold Coast, though. SCG, Bulldogs beat Sydney there last year, and they have a pretty good record, I believe. So I'm going to go with the Bulldogs. In Tassie, that doesn't matter. That's Hawthorn. They won about 100-odd points last time. Port Adelaide up against Carlton at Adelaide Oval. Carlton, I think, won the last one at Adelaide Oval, if I remember right. I'll go with Port, though. Fremantle will win that one comfortably. Oh, God, this... Can I go to 100? How high can you go? 60? Oh, no, you can go to 100. All right. 100 points to Geelong. At Docklands, I'll still go Hawthorn though. North Melbourne up against Bulldogs. North Melbourne. This is about round 17. North Melbourne. I think this is going to be a bit of a jump in form. I'll go with them. Surely Essendon don't choke again. I'll pick them there. Collingwood up against Carlton. Oh, I'm going to go like 3 points here for either side. I'll go Carlton. Sydney up against Fremantle. We lost this one last year. I don't think we do that again. Brisbane up against Port Adelaide. I'll go with Brisbane. And this one's going to be tough too. Melbourne and Crows. I'll go with the Crows. Perth Stadium, I still trust the Giants though. I'll go with the Giants again. I think they've got a good run of form against the Cats. That's down in Mars, so Bulldogs win that one well. St Kilda up against Sydney. This is in Melbourne. Docklands, I feel like Sydney can win that one though. Carlton up against Brisbane at Docklands. You give it to the Lions. Melbourne and North Melbourne at the MCG. I'll go with Melbourne here. Richmond up against Essendon. I'll go with Essendon. It'll be close, but I'll go with Essendon here. Gold Coast up against Collingwood in Gold Coast. Gold Coast have a pretty good record against Collingwood up there, so I'll go with them. Port Adelaide against West Coast. They should win that one comfortably at Adelaide Oval. And then Fremantle up against Hawthorn in Perth. Yeah, I'll go Freo. But that is the end of 18 rounds, guys. So let's take a look at the ladder predictor heading into the final quarter of the season. So looking at the ladder predictor now, Brisbane are on top, equal with Geelong, Hawthorn, and Fremantle, 13 and 4. So it's really tight up the top. Port Adelaide and Collingwood and the Giants all 11 and 6. So a really tight final 8. Sydney are just teetering on the top 8 and the Crows just behind them in 9th. Then you've got Carlton, Melbourne, Bulldogs, and the Gold Coast fighting for those final spots. At this stage, North Melbourne are out, sitting in 14th. Essendon are in 15th. St Kilda are in 16th, West Coast are in 17th, and Richmond, with the one win, are in 18th spot. So let's finally get into the last quarter of the season. The first game up is Geelong up against St Kilda. Geelong at home, I'd pick Geelong. Docklands for Essendon v GWS, close contest, I would imagine. I'm going to go with the Giants. At the MCG, Carlton win that. At the MCG, Collingwood win that. The SCG, Sydney win that. At the Gabba, that's Brisbane every day. Down in Tassie, yeah, that's Hawthorn. Adelaide Oval, yeah, that's the Crows. In Perth, I can't see West Coast losing that. Giants up against Sydney. I'll give Sydney this one. At Docklands, it'll be closer. I'll give them 37 points. St Kilda up against Melbourne in Docklands. Yeah, I'll go the Saints. Bulldogs up against Essendon. Essendon actually have a pretty good record against the Bulldogs, I think. So I'll go with Essendon. Collingwood. I won't be that mean. I'll go to 60. Hawthorn against Carlton. Yeah, I'll go the Hawks. Do I give Gold Coast a Q Clash win here? I think I do. I think they'll win at home. Showdown, Crows v Ports. This will be getting close to the end of the season. And if my predictions are correct, this will be a very important showdown. I'll go with Port. They'll want to win for Ken in his last showdown. Derby. Yeah, that's Freo. And then Port Adelaide and Geelong and Gideon Park. Well, Port Adelaide finally broke the drought down there, but there's going to be a new drought coming. St Kilda up against North Melbourne. I'll give that to North. Why not? I feel like they'll be improving towards the end of the season. Melbourne at home. It is at Docklands though. I don't know. Melbourne haven't played there a lot in the last few years because of how their form's been. They've been a lot better teams, so they don't have to play there as much. But now I don't know if they're going to be as good. I don't really think they're much of a speedy team, so I'm going to go with West Coast in a bit of an upset. I think the Bulldogs win that one. Round 21, Collingwood against Brisbane at the MCG. Close, but Collingwood. Gold Coast win that. Sydney up against Essendon at home. I'll go the Swans. Hawthorn up against Adelaide Oval. This is going to be a good game. I'll go with the Crows in a close one. Freo up against Carlton in Perth. I'll go Freo. Geelong win that one comfortably. Yeah, you go to the Giants there. Carlton win that one well. St Kilda v Richmond. I'm going to give this one to Richmond, being at the MCG. It's going to be a close... I think it'll be a close game, but I think Richmond will get their second win. Melbourne up against the Bulldogs at the MCG. Oh, could you give that one to the Bulldogs? I'm very iffy on the Bulldogs this year. I'm going to go Melbourne, actually. Hawthorn up against Collingwood at the MCG. I'm going to go Collingwood. Brisbane at the Gabba beat the Swans. Port Adelaide up against Fremantle at Adelaide Oval. Yeah, I'll go to Port. Perth Stadium, West Coast v Adelaide. Adelaide haven't been too bad over there the last few years, but I feel like West Coast are going to be on the improve a little bit, at least win some more games at home, so I'll go them. Bellerive, this is down in Tassie, this is North Melbourne all day. Docklands, I feel like St Kilda will win that. Bulldogs up against West Coast. Yeah, the Bulldogs getting that one pretty comfortably. I'm going to go Port Adelaide here in Docklands. Hawthorn up against Melbourne, that's Hawthorn. Gold Coast up against the Giants. Did we give the Gold Coast a bit of an expansion cup win? They've been on a bit of a drought for a very long time. You know what? I'm going to say the Gold Coast break the drought. Sydney up against Geelong at the SCG. Sydney have had a pretty good record against the Cats at the SCG in recent times. I'll go the Swans. Crows up against Collingwood. Collingwood have done well at Adelaide Oval in recent times, but I think the Crows at this stage fighting for their season. I'm going to go with the Crows. Brisbane haven't been too bad against Fremantle in recent times in Perth. But yeah, I'll go Freo here. So finally, guys, we have one more round to go in the season. So I think with 9 games left in the regular season, we'll take a look at the ladder predictor, see what teams have to do to make finals from here. So looking at it right now, I've got the Cats finishing on top with 17 wins and 5 losses. Then we've got Hawthorn and Fremantle in 2nd and 3rd. Brisbane, the reigning premiers, are in 4th. Collingwood are in 5th. Port Adelaide and Sydney are in 6th and 7th, which means the Giants are clinging onto the top 8, with the Crows the only team who can break in. Carlton are out of finals contention in 10th, Gold Coast 11th, Bulldogs 12th, Melbourne 13th, West Coast 14th, North Melbourne 15th, St Kilda 16th, Essendon, I've given him a terrible season, in 17th, and then Richmond in 18th spot. So one round to go. The only finals teams that can change are the Giants and the Crows, sitting either side of the 8. First game, Giants up against St Kilda at home. That's a tough game. I'm going to give it to the Giants. They make the finals, but we'll keep on going. Oh, the Crows would win this one too. Jeez. All right, well, I think that's pretty tough on the Crows, but yeah, I think that's how it's going to play out. At home, the Bulldogs win that. Collingwood up against Melbourne. Collingwood win that one pretty comfortably. Yeah, Geelong do the same. Essendon against Carlton. It's going to be a dead rubber this game, so I'll give it to Essendon. At the Gabba, I'll go with Brisbane. Port win that against the Gold Coast. In Perth, Sydney aren't too bad over there. But there we have it, guys. There is my 2025 AFL ladder predictor, the final one that we'll be making before the season begins. I've got the Cats winning the minor premiership, Brisbane sneaking into 2nd spot, Hawthorn in 3rd, Fremantle in 4th, and Collingwood in 5th, just missing out in the top 4 by percentage. Port Adelaide and Sydney and the Giants round out the top 8. The Crows just miss out on finals. Carlton are in 10th, Bulldogs 11th, Gold Coast 12th. Melbourne are in 13th, West Coast 14th, North Melbourne 15th. With 7 wins, that's a pretty good improvement. St Kilda in 16th, a lot of injuries at the start of the year. I think it's going to hamper them. Essendon right down the bottom in 17th, and then Richmond round out the ladder with the wooden spoon, only 2 wins. So I'm thinking they're going to have a pretty poor year, but I think the next few years for Richmond are going to be tough, but I think overall they're doing the right thing. Let's do a quick wrap up of the final. So first final would be Geelong against Fremantle. This would probably be at the MCG. I'll go with Geelong. Collingwood up against Giants in the first elimination final. I'm going to go with Collingwood. Port Adelaide up against Sydney at Adelaide Oval. Well, this is an elimination final, so I will go Port. If it was a qualifying final, Sydney would win that every day because Port Adelaide are true chokers at that point. Brisbane up against Hawthorn in the first qualifier. I'll go Brisbane because it's in Brisbane. Fremantle up against Collingwood in Perth. I'm only going to say Collingwood because they're decent in Perth. And then Hawthorn against Port Adelaide. That would be an epic semi-final. A rematch of last year. This would be in Melbourne. I'll go with Hawthorn. Sets up an interesting... look at that. Massive rivals. Geelong versus Hawthorn in the prelim final. I'll go with the Cats. And then Brisbane up against Collingwood. At the Gabba, I'll go Brisbane. Which sets up for a grand final against Geelong v Brisbane. And my 2025 premiers at this stage are the Cats. So guys, make sure to know down below what you think of my ladder predictor. Make sure to roast me down below in the comments or agree with me if you think any are somewhat true. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. But for now, we'll catch us all in the next one.